MSG, Monosodium Glutamate. Sounds delicious, doesn't it? But what the heck is it? Well, I'm here to tell you more about it, why you're probably eating it without knowing you're eating it, and why I don't use it in my recipes. Stick around, guys, this is going to be interesting. So this is MSG, a crystalline substance that looks a bit like salt or sugar, and it has a legendary, mythical superpower that gives savoury food ridiculous amounts of umami flavour. It is commonly used in Chinese cooking, or at least in restaurants and takeaways, and is used widely in processed foods. But it also has a reputation of giving people headaches, sweating, nausea, numbness, diarrhea, even heart palpitations. That sounds super scary, doesn't it? But more on that later. First, let's look at what it actually does. MSG is a flavour enhancer. It amplifies and intensifies savoury flavour. That umami taste that you're always hearing about, well, this stuff supercharges it. Sounds great, but it's got to be artificial, right? I mean, even its name sounds like a chemical, monosodium glutamate. Doesn't sound very natural, does it? Well, it might surprise you to learn that MSG is naturally occurring in things like tomatoes and cheese, and that it's actually made by fermenting sugar beets, sugarcane, tapioca or molasses. It might also surprise you to know that our bodies actually synthesize glutamate. Glutamate acts as a neurotransmitter in our brains. Personally, I think part of its problem is the name. It just sounds too chemically. I mean, if we called salt sodium chloride instead of just salt or sea salt or kosher salt, it just wouldn't sound as friendly, would it?
MSG is salt on crack.
It's all in the marketing. So what does it actually taste like? Well, first of all, it hasn't got a discernible smell. And when you actually taste it, you'd expect it to be salty and full of that umami we keep talking about. But actually it's a bit bland. It's quite hard to describe. When you put it on your tongue, you get that hint of saltiness and umami, but it never gives you the full hit. It's there, but it's like the volume has been turned way down. So I'm guessing whatever it does, it's not like salt where it just adds its own flavour, which is actually logical when you think about it, because it's supposed to be a flavour enhancer, not an actual flavouring like salt or pepper. The basic science behind it is the glutamate compounds interact with our taste buds, amplifying the umami flavour of whatever food it's in. This affects the savoury flavour in foods and makes them taste, well, better. The question you might be asking yourself now is, does it actually work? And the answer is, absolutely it does. It really amplifies that umami flavour, and it can really add some zip when added to food. I used to work in my mum's takeaway, so I had the opportunity to try the same dishes with and without MSG, and there is a difference. Food tastes more savoury and intense, and well, just better. If I was going to attempt to describe the effect, it's like 4K HD for your taste buds. So what's the downside? Well, MSG also has the reputation for having a few side effects. People have reported to have suffered headaches, sweats, nausea, numbness, diarrhea, and even heart palpitations after eating food containing MSG. And these are often associated with Chinese restaurants and takeouts. In fact, it has been labelled as Chinese restaurant syndrome, something I find slightly offensive. However, this appears to have started back in 1968 when it was reported that a doctor developed Chinese restaurant syndrome symptoms after eating in a Chinese restaurant and wrote a letter reporting it to the New England Journal of Medicine. This letter, however, was later exposed as a hoax. But despite several trials and extensive research finding no evidence that consuming reasonable amounts of MSG was unsafe, the damage had been done. And since then, MSG has carried the reputation of having harmful side effects. Now, just to hammer that home, as far as I can tell, MSG has been approved as safe to use and consume by every authority that I have looked into. The FDA in the US, the Food Standards Agency in the UK, the EFSA in Europe, the Food Standards Australia and New Zealand, all have declared MSG to pose no health risk within normal use. Of course, that doesn't mean you should drop a bucket load into each dish or food product that you make. For example, the EFSA have set a guideline of 30 milligrams of MSG per kilo of body weight per day as an acceptable level. And even that is just a guide. From all the trials I've seen, and I will link some of them in the video description below, the side effects of MSG or Chinese restaurant syndrome could not be replicated, which I find really very interesting. More on that later. The real kicker is that because MSG does what it does, if you use it, you can actually reduce the amount of sodium in the food you eat. MSG contains 1/3 of the sodium that salt has. Salt is a cheap and easy way for food companies to make food taste better, but we all know that too much sodium is bad for us. If you use MSG to get those flavour gains, you can get away with using less salt and therefore less sodium. So MSG potentially has positive health benefits. But please do your own research. I'm not a food scientist. So why don't I use MSG in my recipes? Well, I'll come to that in just a bit. But first, if you found this video to be useful, a sub to my channel would be tasty. Before I get into why I don't use MSG in my recipes, I also need to emphasize that it is in far more food products than you might expect. MSG as an additive can be found in crisps or chips, as you say in the US, stocks, soups, sauces, ketchups, crackers, ready meals, burgers, fried chicken, the list goes on and on and on. And they don't always label it as MSG in the ingredients. Doing my own research, I looked for certain food products that I felt sure would contain MSG. As I went through more and more products which I assumed would contain MSG, I found more that didn't list it. Curiouser and curiouser, I thought. Whilst doing the family shopping, I was in one supermarket examining a product which I thought should have contained MSG, but appeared not to. It was then another ingredient caught my eye, E621. Now, E621 seemed to be cropping up again and again and again. But what was this mysterious E number? It was then I had a hunch. Detective Chow with Lau was on the case. Feeling strangely excited, I reached for my phone to find that I had no signal. I would have to wait until Mrs. Chow with Lau had finished the shopping until I could go outside and finish my detective work. Or Googling, as most people would probably call it. And just as I suspected, E621 is monosodium glutamate.
What the hell?
But why? Is it a conspiracy? Is MSG a governmental tracking device? A secret COVID vaccine? An alien mind control drug? Probably not. I actually think this truth is a bit weirder than that. Okay, not weirder, but still quite strange. My assessment is that MSG still carries such a negative reputation that some companies are hiding its use by using its E number instead of its actual name. That is crazy. The fact that they believe that something presented as an E number, E numbers which are things we literally think of as artificial food additives, are more palatable than an actual ingredient. Let that sink in for a bit. All that after all the safety tests, checks and trials that pass MSG safe for human consumption. Like I said before, MSG seriously needs a bit of marketing. After basically making a whole video that shows that the research proves that MSG is safe, you're probably wondering why I don't use it in my recipes. And that's a very good question, my friends. Well, it's for two reasons. Basically, if you are cooking from scratch, I don't think that you necessarily need to use it. My channel is focused on using good ingredients and cooking them well. And if you do that, your food will taste amazing. MSG does make food taste better, but if you follow my recipes, you probably won't notice much difference, if any. And secondly, although anecdotal evidence isn't data, there are so many reports of people having some sort of reaction when consuming MSG, I think there must be something to it. I can't just dismiss these people's experiences. I put up a questionnaire as part of my research, and as much as there were many people saying that they used MSG with absolutely no side effects, there were some who said they got symptoms such as headaches, stomach pains, and in one case, muscle weakness. And I don't think we can dismiss this as just psychosomatic or imaginary, especially when I myself have felt some effect. I have often noticed that when I eat from certain restaurants or takeaways, I get a headache after my meal, and no, I don't drink. It feels like my head is tightening up. It's never felt more than a slight discomfort, but it's still there. Like I said earlier, when I worked at my mum's takeaway, I often had food with MSG and I never had any ill effects. After speaking to my mum, she tells me that her policy was always to use minimal MSG as she herself didn't think it was good for you. So my theory is that I develop these headaches when the food passes a certain threshold of MSG content. Now, none of this is scientific, and as we are all different, it could be that we all just react differently to MSG. The general consensus of global health groups have passed MSG safe, and unless this is disproven in the future, that's good enough for me. However, in my view, safe doesn't necessarily mean without consequence. So whatever your thoughts were on MSG, I hope this video has opened your eyes a bit and got you more curious about it. At the end of the day, I'm just another guy talking to his camera. I'm not a food scientist. This bit is all just my opinion, backed up with a little bit of research. By all means, try it out and use it if you want. I'm here to tell you that with all the scientific research that I've seen, it's reasonably safe to do so. So guys, let me know your opinions and experiences of MSG. Let's talk about this and check out these videos to see how you can cook food without needing to use it. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next one.